and gave expression to its horror. Abélard, overwhelmed with shame, despair, and remorse, could now think of nothing better than to abandon the world. Without any vocation, as he well knew, he assumed the monkish habit and retired to the monastery of Saint Denis, while Héloïse, by his order, took the veil at Argenteuil. Her devotion and heroism on this occasion Abélard has described in touching terms. Thus, supernaturalism had done its worst for these two strong, impetuous human souls. If Abélard had entered the cloister in the hope of finding peace, he soon discovered his mistake. The dissolute life of the monks utterly disgusted him, while the clergy stormed him with petitions to continue his lectures. Yielding to these, he was soon again surrounded by crowds of students, so great that the monks at Saint Denis were glad to get rid of him. He accordingly retired to a lonely cell, to which he was followed by more admirers than could find shelter or food. As the schools of Paris were thereby emptied, his rivals did everything in their power to put a stop to his teaching, declaring that as a monk he ought not to teach profane science, nor as a layman in theology, sacred science. In order to legitimize his claim to teach the latter, he now wrote a theological treatise, regarding which he says: "It so happened that I first endeavored to illuminate the basis of our faith by similitudes drawn from human reason, and to compose for our students a treatise on the divine unity and Trinity, because they kept asking for human and philosophic reasons, and demanding rather what could be understood than what could be said, declaring that the mere utterance of words was useless unless followed by understanding, that nothing could be believed that was not first understood, and that it was ridiculous for anyone to preach what neither he nor those he taught could comprehend, God himself calling such people blind leaders of the blind." Here we have Abélard's central position, exactly the opposite to that of his realist contemporary, Anselm of Canterbury, whose principle was credo ut intelligam, I believe that I may understand. We must not suppose, however, that Abélard, with his rationalism, dreamed of undermining Christian dogma. Very far from it. He believed it to be rational, and thought he could prove it so. No wonder that the book gave offense, in an age when faith and ecstasy were placed above reason. Indeed, his rivals could have wished for nothing better than this book, which gave them a weapon to use against him. Led on by two old enemies, Alberich and Lottulf, they caused an ecclesiastical council to be called at Soissons, to pass judgment upon the book (1121). This judgment was a foregone conclusion, the trial being the merest farce, in which the pursuers were the judges, the papal legate allowing his better reason to be overruled by their passion. Abélard was condemned to burn his book in public, and to read the Athanasian Creed as his confession of faith, which he did in tears, and then to be confined permanently in the monastery of Saint Médard as a dangerous heretic. His enemies seemed to have triumphed and to have silenced him forever. Soon after, however, the papal legate, ashamed of the part he had taken in the transaction, restored him to liberty and allowed him to return to his own monastery at Saint Denis. Here once more his rationalistic, critical spirit brought him into trouble with the bigoted, licentious monks. Having maintained, on the authority of Bede, that Dionysius, the patron saint of the monastery, was bishop of Corinth and not of Athens, he raised such a storm that he was forced to flee, and took refuge on a neighboring estate, whose proprietor, Count Thibaut, was friendly to him. Here he was cordially received by the monks of Troyes, and allowed to occupy a retreat belonging to them. After some time, and with great difficulty, he obtained leave from the abbot of Saint Denis to live where he chose, on condition of not joining any other order. Being now practically a free man, he retired to a lonely spot near Nogent-sur-Seine, on the banks of the Ardusson. There, having received a gift of a piece of land, he established himself, along with a friendly cleric, building a small oratory of clay and reeds to the Holy Trinity. No sooner, however, was his place of retreat known than he was followed into the wilderness by hosts of students of all ranks, who lived in tents, slept on the ground, and underwent every kind of hardship in order to listen to him. 1123. These supplied his wants, and built a chapel which he dedicated to the Paraclete, a name at which his enemies, furious over his success, were greatly scandalized, but which ever after designated the whole establishment. So incessant and unrelenting were the persecutions he suffered from those enemies, and so deep his indignation at their baseness, that for some time he seriously thought of escaping beyond the bounds of Christendom, and seeking refuge among the Muslim. But just then, 1125, he was offered an important position, the abbotship of the monastery of San Gildas de Rhuys, in Lower Brittany, on the lonely, inhospitable shore of the Atlantic. Eager for rest, and a position promising influence, Abélard accepted the offer and left the Paraclete, not knowing what he was doing. His position at Saint Gildas was little less than slow martyrdom. The country was wild, the inhabitants were half barbarous, speaking a language unintelligible to him. The monks were violent, unruly, and dissolute, openly living with concubines. The lands of the monastery were subjected to intolerable burdens by the neighboring lord, leaving the monks in poverty and discontent. Instead of finding a home of God-fearing men, eager for enlightenment, he found a nest of greed and corruption. His attempts to introduce discipline, or even decency, among his sons, only stirred up rebellion and placed his life in danger. Many times he was menaced with the sword, many times with poison. In spite of all that, he clung to his office and labored to do his duty. Meanwhile, the jealous abbot of Saint Denis succeeded in establishing a claim to the lands of the convent at Argenteuil, of which Héloïse, long since famous, not only for learning but also for saintliness, was now the head, and